Sometimes the story isn't inside the museum. Sometimes the story is standing outside the locked door wondering what might have been. On this Georgia road trip, Dusty and I found ourselves chasing two museums that seemed determined to stay one step ahead of us. The Georgia Museum of Agriculture and Historic Village and the Georgia State Cotton Museum. Neither visit went exactly as planned. But travel has a funny way of teaching lessons even when the exhibits are closed. And sometimes a return trip starts long before you've actually seen the place you're trying to visit. The Georgia Museum of Agriculture and Historic Village wasn't created simply to display old objects. Its purpose was much larger than that. The museum was designed to preserve a disappearing way of life. For generations, agriculture shaped Georgia's economy, communities, and daily routines. Farms weren't just businesses. They were entire worlds built around seasons, weather, family labor, and local trade. As modernization spread across the South, many of those traditions began fading from everyday life. The answer wasn't simply collecting artifacts and placing them behind glass. Instead, the vision became creating an entire village where visitors could step into the past and experience how people once lived. A place where history could be walked instead of merely read. That idea eventually grew into one of Georgia's largest agricultural history sites. Over time, the museum expanded far beyond a collection of farm equipment. Historic structures were preserved, workshops were recreated, businesses that once served rural communities found new life within the village. Blacksmith shops, general stores, farm buildings, homes, churches. The goal became preserving not just objects, but relationships. How communities functioned, how neighbors relied on one another, how commerce, farming, education, and faith all intertwined. The result is something closer to a living history environment than a traditional museum. At least when everything is open. And that's where our story takes a turn. Like many travelers, we did our homework before arriving, or at least we thought we did. We knew some things might be closed because of the season. January travel can be unpredictable when you're visiting historic sites. But when we pulled into the property, we discovered something we hadn't fully appreciated beforehand. The historic village itself is generally only open on Saturdays during January. Not today, not while we were there, not even close. Suddenly, the biggest part of the attraction was sitting quietly beyond our reach. The destination we'd driven to see had become a destination we'd need to return to someday. And honestly, that happens more often than people think. Even without access to the village, we explored what we could. The first thing that caught both our attention wasn't a building, it was the entrance. The moment we drove in, Dusty and I exchanged a look, because it reminded us of another place, the Alabama Pioneer Museum. Now, under different circumstances, that might sound like a compliment. But for us, that museum came with memories of one of the more frustrating experiences we've had on the road. So seeing similarities immediately put both of us on alert. It's amazing how quickly a place can trigger old travel memories. Sometimes one gate, one driveway, or one building style can transport you somewhere else entirely. Fortunately, first impressions aren't always the whole story. We made our way into the country store, and that's where things improved. The woman working there couldn't have been nicer. I asked a question that's become almost automatic whenever we visit museums or historic sites. Are photos allowed? What about video? If you've followed Travel Made Personal for long, you already know the answer isn't always yes. Sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes it's restricted. Sometimes it's an outright no. Her response was reassuring. As long as things weren't being publicized inappropriately, photography and video shouldn't be a problem when we return. That simple conversation changed the entire mood of the visit. Instead of feeling shut out, it felt like receiving an invitation to come back. We left with information instead of disappointment, and honestly, that's not a bad outcome. Of course, this isn't the part where travel gets real. Not every stop becomes a perfect experience. Not every destination is open. Not every plan survives contact with reality. And our next stop proved that immediately. The Georgia State Cotton Museum was next on our itinerary. We already knew there was a chance it would be closed. So emotionally, we were somewhat prepared. That helped. Because sure enough, when we arrived, we found ourselves staring at another locked destination. Unlike the historic village, though, this one didn't sting quite as much. The Cotton Museum is relatively small. We knew we'd eventually be back through the area, and we knew the visit itself wouldn't require a full day. So rather than feeling defeated, it felt more like postponing a chapter. The story wasn't gone. It just wasn't ready yet. Even though we didn't get to fully experience either museum, both places represent something important. The Georgia Museum of Agriculture preserves the everyday lives that built much of the South. The Georgia State Cotton Museum preserves the story of one of the crops that shaped entire economies, communities, and generations of people. History isn't only found in battlefields and presidential homes. It's found in farms, in general stores, in cotton fields, in ordinary places where ordinary people built their lives. Those stories deserve preservation too. One lesson travel keeps teaching me is that history isn't going anywhere. We don't have to rush every experience. Sometimes the place will still be there next year. Sometimes the story requires a second attempt. And sometimes the most important thing we gain from a stop isn't what we see, it's what we learn. Now we know when the village operates. Now we know what to expect. Now we know how to plan a better visit. That's valuable information. Because travel isn't just collecting experiences, it's building future adventures. If you've ever driven hours to visit something only to discover it was closed, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoy exploring museums, forgotten places, and hidden history across the South, be sure to subscribe and follow along for the next stop. We arrived hoping to explore 2 museums. Instead, we left with 2 future destinations. And maybe that's fitting. Because sometimes the road isn't taking you where you thought you were going. It's simply introducing you to where you'll need to return. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep making travel personal.